I thought I found a best friend, but she was building her identity out of mine. I never thought I'd be writing this story, but here I am at 1 a.m., still shaking from what happened today. My name is Emma, I'm 26, and until recently, I thought I knew everything about trust and friendship. Boy, was I wrong. This whole mess started about 3 years ago when I moved to Seattle for my dream job at a tech startup called Innovate Tech. I was terrified about starting over in a new city where I knew absolutely nobody. I'd spent my entire life in small-town Oregon, where everyone knew everyone, and suddenly I was thrust into this bustling metropolis where I felt completely invisible and overwhelmed. My first few weeks were brutal. I'd wake up in my tiny studio apartment, go to work where I barely spoke to anyone beyond basic pleasantries, grab dinner from whatever was closest to my building, and spend my evenings scrolling through social media watching my college friends live their best lives back home. I was desperately lonely but too proud to admit it to anyone, including myself. That's when I met Qley at a yoga class during my second week there. I'd signed up for yoga thinking it might help with my anxiety and maybe, just maybe, I'd meet someone who could become a friend. I was struggling through my first downward dog when I heard this warm, melodic laugh from behind me. When I turned around, I saw this stunning woman with perfect blonde waves and the kind of effortless style I'd always admired but never achieved. She seemed like everything I wasn't: confident, outgoing, effortlessly cool. She had this magnetic personality that drew everyone to her, and for some reason she chose to befriend me. After class, she approached me with a bright smile and said, "First time? Don't worry, we've all been there. I'm Qley, and you looked like you could use a coffee and someone to laugh about how impossible some of these poses are." Looking back now, I should have seen the red flags, but when you're lonely and desperate for connection, you tend to overlook things that would normally set off alarm bells. The way she immediately positioned herself as the experienced one helping the newbie, the way she assumed I needed rescuing, the way she took charge of our interaction from that very first moment, these were all signs of what was to come. But in that moment, I was just grateful that someone wanted to spend time with me. We went to a cute little coffee shop near the yoga studio, and Qley was everything I wished I could be. She knew the barista by name, ordered this complicated drink with complete confidence, and somehow made the cramped little table by the window feel like the most exclusive spot in Seattle. She told me she worked in marketing for a fashion brand called Luxe Threads, and I was immediately fascinated by how glamorous her life seemed compared to my coding job. She talked about photo shoots and fashion shows, celebrity partnerships, and exclusive events. Meanwhile, I was debugging software and attending meetings about user interface improvements. The contrast couldn't have been starker. Qley and I became inseparable almost immediately. We'd grab coffee every morning before work at this little place called Grind Coffee that was exactly halfway between our apartments. She always knew exactly what to order and would often order for both of us, claiming she had better taste in coffee than I did. At the time, I thought it was sweet that she was taking care of me. We'd go to happy hours together at trendy bars I never would have discovered on my own. Qley seemed to know everyone: bartenders, other patrons, random people who would wave at her from across the room. She'd introduce me as her brilliant tech friend Emma, which always made me feel special, like I was part of her inner circle of interesting people. We'd spend entire weekends together, binge-watching Netflix series while ordering way too much takeout from restaurants Qley would find through her various foodie Instagram accounts. She always had the latest clothes, knew about the coolest restaurants before they became popular, and somehow managed to get us into exclusive events around the city: art gallery openings, fashion shows, pop-up markets that required special invitation. What I didn't realize at first was how much she was studying me. Not in a creepy way, or at least not obviously creepy. She'd ask me tons of questions about my background, my family, my dreams, my fears, my embarrassing moments from childhood. I thought she was just being a good friend, showing genuine interest in my life the way I was interested in hers. I told her everything, and I mean everything. About growing up in Millfield, Oregon, population 3,200, where my dad ran the local hardware store and my mom taught third grade at the elementary school. About how suffocating small-town life felt, where everyone knew your business and expected you to follow the same predictable path. Graduate high school, maybe go to the state university, come back home, get married, have kids, and repeat the cycle. I told her about my parents' messy divorce when I was 17, how it tore our small town apart because everyone had to choose sides. How my dad started drinking too much and my mom became this bitter, angry person I barely recognized. How I threw myself into studying and coding as an escape, spending hours in my bedroom learning programming languages while my family fell apart downstairs. I shared stories about my younger brother Jake, who was 2 years younger than me but seemed decades older in terms of life experience. Jake had started experimenting with drugs in high school, and by the time I left for college, he was already struggling with what would become a serious addiction problem. I told Qley about the sleepless nights I'd spend worrying about him, the frantic phone calls from my parents when he'd disappear for days, the cycle of rehab and relapse that had defined our family dynamic for years. I even told her about my college boyfriend, David, who I'd dated for 3 years and thought I might marry. How I'd found out he was cheating on me with 2 different girls during our senior year. How devastating it was to discover that the person I trusted most in the world had been lying to me for months. How it had made me question everything about my ability to judge people and trust my instincts in relationships. Qley was such a good listener, always remembering the smallest details about things I'd mentioned weeks earlier. When I got promoted at work to lead developer on a major project, she threw me a surprise party at her apartment with decorations in my favorite colors and a cake that said, "Emma the Code Queen." When I was stressed about Jake's latest stint in rehab after he'd been arrested for possession, she'd show up at my apartment with Ben and Jerry's ice cream and terrible rom-coms, letting me cry on her shoulder for hours. When I started dating Marcus, a software engineer I met through a mutual friend at a tech meetup, Qley was the first person I called to squeal about our first kiss. She listened patiently as I analyzed every text message he sent, helped me pick out outfits for our dates, and celebrated with champagne when he asked me to be his girlfriend after our 5th date. But there were moments that felt off, like when we'd go shopping together at places like Nordstrom or boutique stores in Capitol Hill. She'd always push me to buy things that were more her style than mine. She'd hold up crop tops and mini skirts when my style was more jeans and cardigans, saying things like, "Trust me, Emma, you need to be bolder with your fashion choices," or, "You're too safe, you need to take more risks. You'll never stand out if you keep dressing like a librarian." She'd convince me to buy expensive clothes that I felt uncomfortable wearing, then get frustrated when I wouldn't actually wear them out. "What's the point of having a gorgeous wardrobe if you're just going to hide in your old clothes?" she'd say, making me feel guilty for wasting money on things that didn't feel like me. Or the way she'd sometimes finish my sentences when we were with other people, speaking for me in ways that felt presumptuous. We'd be at a bar with a group of people, and someone would ask me a question about my work or my opinion on something, and before I could answer, Qley would jump in with, "Oh, Emma thinks," or "Emma always says." It felt like she was translating me to the world, as if I couldn't speak for myself. She'd make plans for both of us without asking my opinion first, then present them to me as if they were already decided. "We're going to that new rooftop bar on Friday," she'd announce, not, "Would you like to go to that new rooftop bar?" And when I'd occasionally push back or say I had other plans, she'd get this hurt look and say something like, "I thought we always did things together," or, "I guess I'll just go alone then," making me feel guilty for having a life outside of our friendship. Gradually, I noticed that in group settings, people would address her first even when I was the one they actually knew. I'd introduce her to coworkers or people from my building, and somehow by the end of the evening, she'd become the center of attention, and I'd feel like a side character in my own social interactions. The social media thing was weird too. Qley would constantly take photos of us together, claiming she wanted to document our friendship, but somehow I always looked terrible in them, while she looked amazing. She had this skill for angling the camera or timing the shot so that I'd be mid-blink or making an awkward face while she looked like she was posing for a magazine. She'd post them anyway, tagging me with captions like "My beautiful bestie Emma" or "Adventures with my girl," but the photos clearly emphasized how much more put together she was. The comments would always focus on how gorgeous she looked, with maybe 1 or 2 people saying something polite about me looking nice too. She'd also comment on all my posts immediately, often with responses that seemed designed to redirect attention to herself. If I posted a photo from work celebrating a successful product launch, she'd comment something like, "So proud of you. Reminds me of when I led that campaign for Luxe Threads that got us featured in Vogue," turning the conversation back to her achievements. If I posted about a nice dinner Marcus and I had, she'd comment, "Gorgeous. That place is amazing. I actually discovered it months ago and have been meaning to take you there." The chef is a personal friend of mine, always positioning herself as more connected, more knowledgeable, more important than whatever I was sharing. I started to feel like I was losing myself in our friendship, but I couldn't put my finger on exactly why. My confidence, which had been building since moving to Seattle and succeeding at my job, began to waver. I found myself second-guessing my decisions, asking for Qley's approval on everything from what to wear to work to whether I should accept a date with Marcus to how I should handle conflicts with my boss. I'd catch myself adopting her opinions on things I'd never thought about before. She hated pineapple on pizza, so I stopped ordering it even though I'd always loved it. She thought my favorite coffee shop was too basic, so I started going to her preferred place even though their coffee was overpriced and bitter. She said my apartment was so minimalist it feels cold, so I started buying decorative items that matched her aesthetic rather than my own taste. My other friendships started to suffer because Qley always had opinions about the people in my life. She'd find subtle ways to criticize my coworkers, suggesting they were jealous of my success or not really my friends. She'd point out flaws in people I was getting close to, making me question their motives for wanting to spend time with me. "Sarah from your team seems nice," she'd say, "but did you notice how she always tries to one-up your stories? I think she might be threatened by how smart you are." Or, "That girl Jenny from your building is pretty clingy, don't you think? It's like she doesn't have her own life and just wants to attach herself to yours." Slowly, I found myself pulling away from other potential friendships, believing Qley's assessments and feeling like she was the only person who really understood and accepted me. Which, looking back, was exactly what she wanted. Things escalated dramatically when I got offered an incredible opportunity at work, leading a project that would involve traveling to conferences, potentially being featured in tech publications, and working directly with our company's biggest clients. It was the kind of career break I'd been dreaming about since college, and I was over the moon when my boss called me into his office to offer me the position. I called Qley immediately to share the news, barely able to contain my excitement as I told her about the project details, the salary increase, the travel opportunities, and the chance to really make a name for myself in the tech industry. She congratulated me, but something in her voice felt flat, almost disappointed. There was a long pause after I finished talking, and then she said, "Wow, that's really great, Emma. I'm happy for you." But she didn't sound happy. She sounded like she was forcing herself to say the right words while feeling something entirely different. That's when the sabotage started, though I didn't recognize it as such at the time. Suddenly, Qley became critical of everything I did related to work. She'd make comments about how I was getting too big for my britches, or suggest that maybe I wasn't ready for such a big responsibility. "Are you sure you can handle all that pressure?" she'd ask. "You've been pretty stressed lately, and this sounds like it might be too much for you." When I was preparing for my first major conference presentation, she offered to help, but then gave me advice that would have made me look completely unprofessional. She suggested I wear a low-cut dress instead of a business suit, saying it would help me stand out and use my assets. She recommended that I start my presentation with a personal anecdote about my dating life to connect with the audience on a human level. Thankfully, I ran her suggestions by my coworker Sarah, who gently steered me in the right direction. "Emma," she said, "this is a technical conference, not a cocktail party. You want them to remember your code, not your cleavage." It was Sarah's reaction that first made me wonder if Qley's advice wasn't as helpful as I'd thought. Qley started forgetting about plans we'd made, especially when they involved celebrating my achievements. When I got a great review from my first client presentation, I texted her excitedly and suggested we go out for dinner to celebrate. She replied hours later saying she'd forgotten she had plans with her coworkers and couldn't cancel. When I rescheduled for the following week, she got food poisoning the day of and had to bail again. But when her work had a minor victory, like getting mentioned in a local fashion blog, she expected me to drop everything to celebrate with her, and I always did because that's what I thought good friends were supposed to do. When Marcus planned a surprise dinner for me after my successful presentation at the Pacific Northwest Tech Summit, where I'd gotten standing applause and 3 job offers from competing companies, Qley somehow found out about it and showed up uninvited. She claimed she'd been in the neighborhood and just wanted to stop by and congratulate me, but then she ended up staying for the entire evening. She spent the whole dinner talking about her own work drama, how her boss was stealing her ideas, how she wasn't getting the recognition she deserved, how she was thinking about quitting and starting her own marketing consultancy. She completely hijacked what was supposed to be my moment, and by the end of the night, even the waitress was asking Qley about her business plans instead of congratulating me on my presentation. Marcus was frustrated, I could tell, but he was too polite to say anything. Later that night, he He gently mentioned that it was odd how Qley had turned my celebration into her therapy session. It was the first time someone else had validated what I was feeling about her behavior. But the real turning point came 6 months ago when I decided to start a blog about women in tech. It was something I'd been thinking about for a while, inspired by my experiences being one of the few women in my field and all the challenges I'd faced. I wanted to create a platform where I could share my experiences and hopefully help other women navigating similar challenges in male-dominated industries. I had a clear vision for the blog. I wanted to call it Code Queens, with a pink and black color scheme and a logo that incorporated both feminine elements and tech symbols. I'd planned to write about everything from dealing with imposter syndrome to negotiating salaries to handling sexist comments from colleagues. I'd even outlined my first 10 posts and created mock-ups of what I wanted the site to look like. I was so excited about the project that I told Qley about it during one of our coffee dates, sketching out my vision on napkins and showing her the mock-ups I'd created on my phone. I talked about my content strategy, my target audience, my posting schedule. I even showed her the Instagram account name I'd reserved and the Twitter handle I wanted to claim. She seemed incredibly supportive, asking detailed questions about everything: what platform I was going to use, how I planned to monetize it, what kind of engagement I was hoping for. She said she loved the concept and thought it was exactly the kind of thing the industry needed. She even offered to help with promotion through her marketing contacts and suggested we could do some cross-promotional content since fashion and tech were both industries where women faced similar challenges. I was grateful for her enthusiasm and expertise. Having someone with her marketing background excited about my project made me feel like it could really succeed. 2 weeks later, I was scrolling through Instagram during my lunch break when I saw a post that made my blood run cold. Qley had launched her own blog, with almost the exact same concept, design, and even similar content topics to what I described to her. She'd called it Boss Babes in Business, with a pink and gold color scheme and a logo that was eerily similar to my mock-ups. Her first post was about breaking through glass ceilings in corporate America, which was almost identical to the first post I'd outlined for my blog called Shattering the Glass Ceiling in Tech. Her second post was navigating office politics as a young woman, while I'd planned to write Surviving Boys Club Mentality in the Workplace. She'd beaten me to market with my own idea, and she'd done it using insider information I'd shared with her in confidence. When I confronted her about it the next time we met for coffee, she acted shocked that I was upset. She claimed it was just a coincidence, that she'd been thinking about starting a blog for months, but just hadn't mentioned it to me. She said there was room for both of us in the space, and suggested we could even collaborate sometimes, maybe doing guest posts on each other's sites. The gaslighting was so smooth, so practiced, that I almost believed her. She had this way of making me feel like I was being unreasonable for being upset, like I was trying to claim ownership over an entire concept that lots of women were writing about. "I mean, it's not like you invented the idea of women's empowerment blogs," she said with a laugh that felt condescending. "There are hundreds of them already. I think you're reading too much into this, Emma. We're both strong women trying to make it in difficult industries. We should be supporting each other, not competing." But I started paying closer attention after that, and what I discovered made me sick to my stomach. Qley hadn't just stolen my blog idea. She'd been systematically copying aspects of my life for months, and I'd been too trusting and naive to notice. She'd started shopping at the same stores I frequented, not just similar stores, but the exact same places. I'd mentioned loving a particular boutique in Fremont, and within a week she'd be posting Instagram stories from that same boutique, talking about how it was her new favorite place, and how she'd discovered this hidden gem. She'd started ordering the same drinks I liked. I'd been getting this specific lavender latte from our regular coffee shop for months, and suddenly Qley decided it was her signature drink too. When the barista would see us coming, he'd start making the usual, my lavender latte, and whatever Qley was drinking that week. But then Qley switched to lavender lattes too, and the barista started asking which one of us got which drink. She'd even begun adopting mannerisms and phrases that were distinctly mine. I had this habit of saying, "That's fair," when someone made a good point, and suddenly Qley was saying it constantly. I'd unconsciously play with my hair when I was nervous, and I noticed Qley start doing the same thing. I had a particular way of laughing at my own jokes, this self-deprecating giggle, and Qley began laughing the same way. The most disturbing discovery was that she'd started telling stories about her childhood that sounded suspiciously similar to stories I'd told her about mine, just with minor details changed. I'd told her about the time my dad taught me to change a tire in the parking lot of his hardware store when I was 12, and how proud I felt to be trusted with something so grown-up. A few weeks later, I heard her telling someone at a party about how her dad had taught her to change a tire when she was 12, except in her version, it happened at his construction company instead of a hardware store. I'd shared a story about how my mom used to make me practice typing on an old manual typewriter she'd found at a garage sale, and how the clicking of the keys became this comforting sound that reminded me of home. Later, Qley told a group of people about how her mom had encouraged her love of writing by buying her a vintage typewriter, and how the sound of typing still made her feel nostalgic. She was stealing my memories and presenting them as her own experiences. The worst part was discovering that she'd been actively undermining me with our mutual friends. Through careful conversations with people in our social circle, I learned that Qley had been spreading subtle rumors about me. Nothing overtly malicious, just little seeds of doubt about my character and reliability. She'd tell people I'd been going through a difficult time, or that I'd been acting strange lately. But when pressed for details, she'd get this concerned look and say she didn't want to gossip, but she was just worried about me. She'd suggest that I was struggling with the pressure of my new job, that I'd been drinking more than usual, that I'd been having problems in my relationship with Marcus. None of it was true, but it was all plausible enough that people didn't question it. And because Qley presented herself as my caring, concerned best friend, people believed she had my best interests at heart when she shared these worries about me. She'd also been positioning herself as the more reliable, more fun version of me in our friend group. When I couldn't make it to events because of work commitments or travel for conferences, she'd tell people I was becoming antisocial, or too focused on career stuff to maintain friendships. She'd make it sound like I was choosing work over the people I cared about, painting me as someone who'd gotten too big for my britches and forgotten about the friends who'd supported me. Meanwhile, she'd swoop in to fill the social gap I'd left, organizing group activities and positioning herself as the connector who brought everyone together. She was slowly replacing me in my own social circle, becoming the person people called when they wanted to make plans or needed someone to talk to. The identity theft became even more blatant when she started dating someone who was eerily similar to Marcus. Same profession, software engineering, same interests, rock climbing and craft beer. Even similar physical appearance, tall, dark hair, glasses, beard. She'd post photos with him doing activities that Marcus and I had done together, hiking the same trails we'd discovered, visiting the same breweries we'd recommended to her, even going to the same concerts we'd attended. It was like she was trying to recreate my relationship with a different cast of characters. She'd tell stories about her new boyfriend that paralleled stories I'd told about Marcus, but with just enough differences that it wouldn't be obvious plagiarism to anyone who wasn't paying close attention. I felt like I was going crazy. How do you explain to people that your best friend is stealing your identity without sounding paranoid? How do you prove that someone is deliberately copying your life when they're smart enough to make it look like coincidence? I started documenting things, taking screenshots of her posts that seemed to copy mine, keeping notes about conversations where she'd repeat stories I'd told her. But even with evidence, I worried that I'd sound like a conspiracy theorist if I tried to explain what was happening to anyone else. The breaking point came last month when I discovered that Qley had been impersonating me online. I was Googling myself for professional reasons, making sure my LinkedIn and company bio came up first in search results, when I found social media accounts using variations of my name and photos that included me but were cropped to focus mainly on her. There was an Instagram account called @EmmaCodeQueen, using the name I'd planned for my blog, with photos of both of us, but edited so that I was barely visible while she was prominently featured. The bio described the account owner as a tech industry leader and influencer, living in Seattle, but all the content was about Qley's life and opinions. She was using these fake accounts to network in my industry, reaching out to people I'd mentioned, wanting to connect with professionally. I found messages she'd sent to speakers from conferences I'd attended, to recruiters from companies I was interested in, even to journalists who'd covered stories about women in tech. She'd been introducing herself as Emma, sharing details about my actual work and achievements, but then steering conversations toward her own projects and interests. It was sophisticated identity theft, designed to capitalize on my professional reputation while ultimately benefiting her own career. But the absolute worst part was when I found out she'd been contacting my family. She'd somehow gotten my brother Jake's phone number, probably from my phone when I wasn't looking, and had been texting him, positioning herself as a concerned friend who was worried about my recent behavior changes. She'd told him I'd been drinking too much and isolating myself, that I'd been having panic attacks and mood swings, and that she was trying to stage an intervention but wasn't sure how to help me. She'd painted herself as the devoted friend who was desperately trying to save me from some kind of breakdown that existed only in her imagination. Jake, who was in a fragile state of recovery himself and dealing with his own mental health challenges, believed her completely. He called my parents in a panic, telling them that my friend Qley had reached out because she was worried I was having some kind of crisis, and that maybe they needed to intervene. I had to spend an entire weekend doing damage control, explaining to my confused and worried family that none of what Qley had told them was true. The conversation with my parents was heartbreaking. They didn't understand why my friend would lie about such serious things, and I could see them questioning whether maybe there was some truth to her concerns about my mental state. "Honey," my mom said gently, "people don't usually make up stories like this unless there's some basis in reality. Are you sure you're okay? Maybe you have been under more stress than you realize." Having to convince my own parents that I wasn't having a mental breakdown was one of the most humiliating and infuriating experiences of my life. The fact that Qley had manipulated my family's love and concern for me into weapons against me felt like the ultimate betrayal. That's when I decided I'd had enough. I started documenting everything systematically, screenshotting her posts, saving evidence of her copying my content, gathering proof of her lies and manipulation. I consulted with a lawyer about the fake social media accounts and the professional impersonation, and I was shocked to learn that what she'd been doing could actually constitute identity theft, harassment, and potentially even fraud. I also reached out to a therapist, not because there was anything wrong with me, but because I needed professional validation that what was happening to me wasn't normal friendship behavior. I was starting to doubt my own perceptions and wondered if maybe I was being oversensitive or reading too much into innocent coincidences. The therapist, Dr. Martinez, immediately recognized the pattern as something she'd seen before. She explained that what Qley was displaying was a combination of narcissistic behavior, identity disturbance, and obsessive tendencies that bordered on stalking. "What you're describing isn't friendship," she told me. "It's a form of psychological abuse called identity theft, or sometimes mirroring. It happens when someone with certain personality disorders becomes obsessed with another person's life and tries to essentially take it over." She helped me understand that Qley's behavior wasn't about me personally. It was about her own deep psychological issues and her inability to develop a stable sense of self. She was essentially trying to become me because she couldn't figure out how to be herself. Armed with professional support and documented evidence, I finally confronted Qley directly. I asked her to meet me at Grind Coffee, ironically, the same place where we'd had our first real conversation 3 years earlier. I'd prepared for the conversation extensively, writing down key points I wanted to make and gathering all my evidence in a folder. I was nervous but determined to finally stand up for myself and set clear boundaries. I arrived early and chose a table in the back corner where we'd have some privacy. When Qley walked in, she looked exactly like she always did, perfectly put together, confident, smiling like nothing in the world was wrong. She ordered her usual, which used to be my usual, and sat down across from me with a bright, "So what's up, babe?" I took a deep breath and laid everything out calmly and clearly. I showed her the evidence of her copying my blog concept, her fake social media accounts using my name, screenshots of her lies to our mutual friends and my family. I explained how her behavior had affected my mental health, my relationships, and my career. "Qley," I said, "I need you to understand that what you've been doing isn't okay. You've been systematically copying my life, stealing my ideas, and spreading lies about me to the people I care about. This isn't friendship, this is harassment." Her reaction was unlike anything I'd ever witnessed, and it unfolded in distinct stages that I now recognize as classic manipulation tactics. First, she tried complete denial. "Emma, I have no idea what you're talking about," she said with a confused laugh. "You're being paranoid. These are all just coincidences. I think you're under too much stress from work and you're seeing patterns that aren't really there." When I showed her the screenshots and evidence, making it impossible for her to deny the facts, she switched strategies. Then came anger. "Are you seriously accusing me of stealing your life?" she said, her voice getting louder. "That's insane, Emma. You don't own ideas about women's empowerment or coffee preferences or hiking trails. You're being completely unreasonable and honestly kind of narcissistic to think that everything I do is somehow about you." She accused me of being jealous of her success, of trying to bring her down because I couldn't handle having a friend who was doing better than me. "You used to be supportive of my goals," she said. "But ever since you got that promotion, you've changed. You've become competitive and mean." When anger didn't work, she switched to tears and emotional manipulation. She started crying, telling me how much our friendship meant to her, how she'd never want to hurt me intentionally. She claimed that she admired me so much she just wanted to be more like me, that it was a form of flattery, not theft. "I look up to you so much, Emma," she sobbed. "You're everything I wish I could be, successful, smart, confident. If I've been copying you, it's only because I think you're amazing and I want to learn from you. I never meant any harm." She begged me not to end our friendship over misunderstandings, promising she'd be more careful about being original in the future. She made it sound like the whole thing was just an innocent mistake that had gotten out of hand. But then, when none of her other tactics worked, the mask completely slipped. For just a few seconds, I saw who she really was underneath all the charm and manipulation. Her face went completely cold, all traces of tears and emotion disappearing instantly. Her voice became flat and emotionless. "You know what, Emma?" she said, looking me straight in the eye. "You should be flattered that anyone would want to copy your boring little life. You're not that interesting or special. You're just a basic girl from nowhere with a basic job and basic problems. I made you better. I made you worth copying." The cruelty in her voice was chilling. This wasn't the concerned friend or the jealous acquaintance or the confused victim she'd been pretending to be. This was someone who genuinely resented me for existing, who saw me as nothing more than a collection of assets to be harvested for her own use. "And honestly," she continued, "everyone knows you're not as smart or talented as you think you are. The only reason you got that promotion is because you're sleeping with Marcus, and he has connections in the industry. The only reason people pretend to like you is because I make you interesting enough to be around." That's when I knew I was dealing with someone who was genuinely dangerous to my well-being, someone who had never seen me as a friend or even as a real person, just as a resource to be exploited. I stood up from the table, my hands shaking but my voice steady. "Qley," I said, "I want you to listen to me very carefully. I am cutting all contact with you, effective immediately. I've already informed our mutual friends about your behavior. I've documented everything you've done, and if you continue to impersonate me online or contact my family, I will pursue legal action." I blocked her on all social media platforms that night, changed my phone number the next day, and even moved to a different apartment across town within 2 weeks. I'd been month to month on my lease anyway, and I realized I needed a fresh start in a place she'd never been. The aftermath has been both liberating and difficult. I lost several friends who chose to believe Qley's version of events, or who simply didn't want to deal with the drama. Some people thought I was overreacting to what seemed like normal friendship conflicts. Others believed Qley when she told them I'd had some kind of breakdown and was making up stories about her. But I also gained so much that I hadn't expected. I learned to trust my instincts again, to value my own perceptions over other people's opinions of what seemed reasonable or plausible. I developed stronger boundaries and a clearer sense of who I am independent of other people's validation. Most importantly, I learned that toxic people often target those who have something they want, whether it's confidence, success, relationships, or simply qualities they wish they possessed. Qley didn't become obsessed with copying me because I was weak or naive. She did it because I had built a life she envied but couldn't create for herself. My relationship with Marcus actually grew stronger through this experience. He was incredibly supportive throughout the whole ordeal and helped me see that what happened wasn't a reflection of my worth or judgment, but rather a testament to Qley's psychological issues. I still have moments of sadness about the friendship I thought we had, but I've come to realize that it was never real from her perspective. She wasn't interested in knowing the real me. She was interested in becoming me. And while that experience was traumatic, it also taught me invaluable lessons about self-worth, boundaries, and the importance of trusting my own instincts. If anyone reading this recognizes similar patterns in their own relationships, please trust yourself. You're not crazy, you're not being too sensitive, and you deserve friends who celebrate your success rather than trying to steal it. Don't let anyone dim your light just because it's shining too brightly for their comfort. Life is too short to spend it with people who see you as competition rather than a companion. Choose your inner circle wisely, and never be afraid to protect your peace, even if it means walking away from people you once cared about deeply. The real friends will always stay, and the fake ones will eventually reveal themselves. Trust the process, trust yourself, and never apologize for being authentically you.